Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA Detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Welcome back to the Lights Out Podcast. I am the MMA Detective, Mike Davis. Along with me, my partner in crime, Miguel Iturrate. Miguel, mixed martial artifacts. Charlie Smith, renowned collector, is with us. Charlie, what item are you introducing to us today?
Hey guys, thanks again for having me on board your show. I love it. Today's a little special one. We had to go to Japan to grab this item. Actually, Japanese historical MMA piece, but legendary MMA, not so much. Legendary athlete, Olympian Rulon Gardner trophy that we were able to get from his battle with Yoshida. And I think you're a little bit knowledgeable on this one, Mike.
Absolutely. So the event took place December 31st, 2004. Someone's birthday here. Not going to say who. But anyway, I know where I was. I was watching this on, I think, my parents' bed, on one of those cheater cable boxes, watching through the blurred lines. December 31st, 2004, Pride Shockwave. It was a fight that featured, I think, maybe the first, if not only ever in MMA history, where we had two gold medal winners fight in an MMA bout. Am I correct when I say that, Charlie?
Yeah.
Yep, that is correct.
No,
Yep.
Olympic
Has
gold medal.
it happened
Olympic gold
since,
medals.
or is
Yep.
it the only one?
It's only to my knowledge, that is the first and only time that two gold medalists have ever competed in mixed martial arts against each other.
So
And
Miguel.
that gives a real international perspective to this item, because Rulon Gardner really is not going to be like a huge name on the American mixed martial arts scene. But, he wrote a legendary story on the wrestling end, which got him this gig. It's actually, Mike is going to fill us in a little more on that sort of stuff. But what he did in wrestling was that he defeated probably the person that would be named as the greatest wrestler of the last century by the majority of the people on the entire planet. And that's Alexander Terrell. You know what I mean? And so to me, I think it's almost, hopefully, you didn't have to buy this piece from some Russian oligarch or something, because it could be really expensive when you start getting, that type of perspective on it and the type of interest Karelin. We talked recently to Vladimir Matyushenko. We've had a couple of people, Russian fighters, and the reverence they talk about Karelin with is something that you really have to see to understand. When you're talking about that level of combat athlete, and then there's another that there's, how many levels are there really above, a Pat Miletich or a Mark Coleman or whatever? Well, the Russians consider Alexander Karelin that figure. So Rulon Gardner's legend comes from that win, and that's one of the biggest upsets of the last century in almost any sport.
So let me kind of fill in the little blanks here. Rulon Gardner competed in two Olympics, the 2000 and 2004. In 2000, he beat Karelin in the finals for the gold medal. 2004, he took the bronze. And in 1992, Barcelona, Yoshida won the gold medal in Judo at 78 kilograms. So when you talk to like your average MMA historian, they will say Fedor Emelianenko is the greatest heavyweight of all time. Look at the numbers, look at his run. What Fedor Emelianenko did was incredibly impressive. Top of the list for mixed martial arts. It pales in comparison to what Karelin accomplished, and Rulon Gardner is the person that beat him. I think, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a rule change that took place that year that Rulon kind of exploited in order to get the victory, and had that rule not been in play, it's possible that Karelin would have continued his feat. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. And you talk to a lot of wrestlers who competed at that time on Pan Am or American, the highest levels. the worlds, or you talk to anyone who competed at the Olympic level, without that rule change, it may have went different. But to the casual fan, they didn't know any different. They just saw the lion got slain and there was a new king, you know. And of course, at the time, Pride Fighting Championships, they really marketed themselves on going after the biggest names and the biggest attraction, where it was more of an event. It was not just fights in the Pride Fighting Championships. Every match was main event quality, even if it was kind of a gold medalist versus gold medalist, right? Yeah.
So let me give a little history on this. So we'll open up a little bit about Pride. The thing with Pride is, like, for instance, you've got Rampage Jackson fighting. They would intentionally put him with lower class opponents, well knowing so you could see the big slams and like the flashy endings and the howling and the barking and the chains. So, you know, the pageantry of Pride was kind of like where the WWE is today in certain components. And it was done intentional to give Rampage his, I guess, a story, build his reputation up, and then throw him in against a hard fight. And like when you saw Rampage go over to the UFC, you saw he didn't get those big slams. It's because that level of competition was more even rather than kind of highlighting his best attributes. So in this fight, here's the problem that Pride made, in my opinion. They made this fight about 6 weeks out. So the negotiation for Rulon Gardner up until the initial phone call to him walking through those ring ropes was literally 6 weeks. So it was kind of a rushed camp. So the Rulon Gardner that we saw that night wasn't a polished mixed martial arts athlete. He was just somebody that learned some jiu-jitsu and wound up over at Team Quest, like Randy Couture's in his corner. He looks like a wrestler that's just out of his comfort zone, that is just trying to get his hand raised. I don't know what kind of money was offered, but I mean, it's an interesting fight to watch just based on the sheer enormity of Rulon at this time.
I think it was definitely a way for the Japanese to have an attempt to have their gold medalist take out an American gold medalist on very short notice, because Yoshida at that time really was a polished fighter. His submission game was top notch. He had a striking background. He wasn't an elite striker, but definitely way more experienced than Rulon definitely had at that time. And they were notorious for working their athletes into the best scenario possible to get a victory. But it didn't work out that way.
Wait. Miguel, do you know anything about maybe Japanese politics and Pride? Can you kind of maybe give our audience an example of such?
Well, you know, there are all kinds of stories. In this particular case, obviously you've got Yoshida there, and Yoshida's going to be a guy that comes, you know, with a lot of extras there. You know, a gold medalist, he's sponsored. The fact is they probably had to get permission from like the Judo commissions and things like that to even let him compete. And there was always those types of controversies with some of the Japanese athletes. In this particular case, Yoshida did become a real mixed martial artist as he progressed throughout his career, and he did get Rulon a little bit later. Rulon, to me, in this match is really grabbing money. And it's the kind of thing that is reflecting bad on the American system, really, in that we don't take better care of our athletes. Now this is because this is not a situation where Rulon Gardner wasn't interested in doing this, not like Mark Coleman, you know? You know what I mean? It's like, Mark, you could have been like, he didn't need to see it. You could tell him about it and he would say, sign me up. I think Rulon was not a guy. I think Rulon may have been more like a Mark Kerr, where, at the end of the day, getting hit and hitting wasn't it for him. So he took this purely for the money. I think, as pointed out, he wasn't really prepared for mixed martial arts. I think he probably did his normal camp and stuff, grabbed his money. Later on, or at some point in this whole Rulon Gardner situation, he turned down $1 million offer to fight Fedor. So they were trying to bring him up. $1 million I don't know, maybe I'm old. I remember when $1 million used to move the needle, right? Yeah, apparently, not enough to fight Fedor. I think a lot of people understand.
So Rulon at this point, like I said, his camp was with Team Quest, but he had such like a small window of opportunity to prepare for this. Some of the other guys that he went and rolled with were Frank Shamrock and Dean Lister. So Dean Lister, multiple-time world champion. Frank Shamrock, obviously a UFC world champion, but he started in California and wound up in Oregon with the natural Randy Couture. So it was an interesting kind of like path and road for him to take to get to Japan. But as Miguel said, this is a money grab. It's a money grab, and Rulon, if you read his Wikipedia, like I said, I don't have any interaction with the guy. Never met him. Watched a bunch of his wrestling matches on YouTube, but his situation, like as a country, it's shameful that he's in that. And I'm not saying that he isn't at fault for the situation he's in financially, but we don't take care of our Olympic athletes here. That's for sure. We as a country.
Yeah. I'm sure Karellin's doing a little better.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's probably
so Charlie, how did you come about this item?
Pretty cared for, and that's a contrast. Usually we win the contrast in social society with when we compare our society to Russian society, we are free, et cetera, et cetera. But in that particular case, they got us beat by a long shot, and that's taking care of their guys.
Right. So Charlie, how did you come about this item?
Well, fortunately for me, Rulon Gardner did like to grab some cash. So in California, a gentleman that does a lot of autograph signings and so forth was doing some autograph sessions with Rulon, and it was brought to his attention that kind of made some publicity at the time that Rulon was parting with a lot of his other items, wrestling items, and even his Olympic gold medal. When I heard that, it was brought to my attention that this trophy may be available. And when it became available, we worked out a deal, kind of brokered a deal. And once that was done, I started getting concerned. I paid for the item and it didn't arrive till several months later, but it ended up showing up. So you can imagine how I felt on that. But it was a piece of history I think that we needed to preserve. First gold medalist, maybe ever from America, competing in Japan in the Pride organization. Gold medal versus gold medal. Pride won itself. I think it was kind of started with the legend of a Gracie fighting legend of a professional wrestler. So there was always about marketing in Pride and trying to get that big event or that big match to grab attention. And I think that's what this was. Interesting match. Actually not a terribly unentertaining match. Definitely kept your attention. Probably should have had a lot more favor on Yoshida's side, but Rulon did what he had to do to win, earn the trophy. And but one day it's going to be preserved and put in the right place. And I think that's the most important part with all these artifacts. Let's get them back where they belong. Tell the story of mixed martial arts.
And what is the inscription for the people at home that can't read? They can't make it out. What does it say on the trophy?
Yeah, he autographed the front, Rulon Gardner champ, and then with a date on it. We'll get a closer picture maybe up there for you as well. And I believe I have the fight pass, also his actual fighter pass from Pride, and he signed that as well. So I got both of those to kind of complete the collection. But a really cool card, really interesting time in the history of the sport. And just one of those pieces to complete the collection. You got to have those items.
Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our quest to just kind of notate mixed martial artifacts. Charlie obviously has joined us. One day we hope there's a brick and mortar store, and maybe there's somebody in our audience that might be able to help with that, or as well as maybe help find other artifacts that could be showcased in it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.